The wrong woman can set you back 10 times more than anything else. There are certain behaviors you should watch out for and be mindful of so you can run away from that kind of ill-intentioned woman with a distorted mindset. We live in an era where any behavioral criticism is quickly labeled as sexism. But what if the behavior in question is disguised as empowerment, while beneath the surface, it only reveals an emotionally unstable, reactive, and childish identity? The woman who declares herself independent but demands everything from a man, who claims to be free but lives for male approval, who claims to be mature but eschews any depth. She dons the armor of modern discourse, but inside, she is still guided by unresolved traumas, wounds of abandonment, an inflated ego, and a broken heart. The truth? The man of value, the centered man, is increasingly alert. He is no longer the fool who falls for a pretty face or a provocative body. He is learning that beauty without structure is a trap, that sensuality without awareness is ruin, and that misunderstood empowerment is just neediness with a filter and caption. It is in this minefield, where pretty talk hides shallow intentions, that many men stumble. Most realize it too late, when they're already emotionally drained, financially drained, or worse, when they've already been used as an emotional ladder by someone they never intended to walk alongside. The problem isn't female freedom. The problem is when that freedom becomes a cover for emotional irresponsibility. When the "I'm just like this" argument becomes a shield to prevent change, evolve, or contribute. The woman who says all men are toxic, but has never stopped to examine the patterns she repeats. The woman who talks about independence but can't even afford her own therapy. The woman who screams freedom but is held hostage by male attention all the time. This is the blind spot of today's discourse, when the search for empowerment becomes a disguised escape from self-accountability. And perhaps the most dangerous thing about all this is that at first, she seems incredible, magnetic, fun, the kind of woman who walks into any room and lights up everything around her. But she doesn't light up, she burns. Because behind the performance, there's no structure. And the man who builds, who thinks long-term, who wants more than a skin-to-skin connection, needs to know this before the charm becomes too costly. Today I didn't come to give you hope. I came to give you clarity, because the worst prison a man can enter is thinking he's falling in love, when in fact he's being used. And if you don't see the signs, you'll just be another name on the list of stories she uses to feel interesting. Picture this. She walks into the restaurant with a confident stride, phone in hand, eyes trained to ignore anyone who doesn't serve her ego. Her Instagram feed says she's independent, empowered, wild, and free. But a longer conversation is enough to realize she doesn't back up anything she says. Independence has become a costume. And worse, a costume she demands you believe. The woman who says, "I'm enough on my own," is the same woman who 10 minutes later says a man who splits the bill is a tightwad. The contradiction is so glaring it seems satirical, but she believes it, or rather, she needs to believe it. Because deep down she knows that if she stops to think honestly, everything falls apart. This is the fatal error. Men of worth, especially those who grew up being told they should respect, care, and protect, look at this type of woman and see strength where there's only emotional survival. They confuse poise with structure. They confuse self-esteem with defensiveness. They think they're looking at a potential partner when in reality, they're looking at a dependent woman disguised as a queen. And the worst part? She knows. She knows she's enchanting you not for who she is, but for who you imagine her to be. And this is the oldest trick in the social game, letting the other person project onto you what they want to find, and then using that as currency. She sells herself as self-sufficient, but uses the term smooth macho as if it were a moral failing. She says she doesn't need anyone, but expects the guy to pay for absolutely everything. She posts stories about not depending on a man, at the exact moment she's heading to the second party, paid for with someone's credit card. This isn't strength, this is performance. A performance constructed not to be admired, but to manipulate. This type of woman grew up watching feminist discourse be hollowed out by consumer culture. Independence became aesthetic. Girl boss became synonymous with selfishness disguised as ambition. And of course, she learned that men like strong women. So what does she do? She plays the role. But it's a role that crumbles when life demands more than selfies, close-ups, and cliches. Let's talk about the emotional dynamics behind it. This woman learned early on that vulnerability is weakness. Perhaps she was betrayed, used, rejected. Perhaps she saw her mother rely too heavily on someone and vowed never to repeat that pattern. But instead of healing, she shielded herself. She created a persona, and this persona is so rigid that it only works under certain conditions: status, control, attention. When faced with real emotional demands like empathy, surrender, dialogue, she breaks, because that would require her to break character. And breaking character would mean facing her own emptiness. And herein lies the brutal contradiction. This woman demands a mature, strong man, an emotional provider. But she herself acts like a spoiled teenager with an expensive iPhone. She wants to be treated like a goddess, but doesn't offer even half of what she demands. She doesn't add, she demands. She doesn't build. She expects. She has no plans. She has desires. And an effortless, commitmentless, and unconscious desire. It's just a whim. But let's go a step further. Why do so many men fall for this? Because this type of woman knows exactly how to trigger the protective masculine. She plays with sensuality, with selective sweetness, with the air of, I'm different from the others. And many men, especially those who have been emotionally neglected, feel like they've finally found someone who needs them. It's the male ego being fed, until it's drained. The truth is, she doesn't want a partnership. She wants an audience. She wants you to see her as a diamond in the rough, someone who just needs to be polished. And if you try, she'll use it against you. She'll say you're trying to control her. She'll accuse you of wanting to change who she is, when in truth, she doesn't even know who she is. She just knows she doesn't want to be alone. But she also doesn't want to give up anything. And in this impasse, you lose time, energy, and sometimes even your identity. That's why this chapter is called The Charm of False Self-Sufficiency. Because at first glance, it's charming. She seems to have vision, attitude, presence, but what she really has is a script copied from TikTok. A truly independent woman doesn't need to constantly prove it. She acts, she chooses, she adds value. She knows that value isn't shouted, it's demonstrated. And she's unfazed by a man who suggests sharing, planning, and talking. Because she has the internal structure for it. The performative woman, on the other hand, reacts with contempt. Because any sign of equality threatens the narrative she's created. She needs to be cared for, admired, pampered, but under the illusion that she's strong and empowered. It's a paradox. She wants power without responsibility. She wants freedom without consequences. She wants benefits without reciprocity. And the man who doesn't see this becomes just another extra in her play, someone useful until he's not. If you're with a woman who demands more than she gives, who talks a lot and builds little, who claims to be strong but doesn't face any real challenges with maturity, you're not with a partner. You're carrying a burden disguised as a gift. And the problem with carrying a burden is that, sooner or later, it breaks your back. And you'll still be to blame. In the end, the charm of false self-sufficiency is one of the biggest emotional lies of our generation, because it masks emptiness with attitude. And many men, lacking real connection, confuse noise with value. But a truly worthwhile woman doesn't need to prove anything to you. She shows up, commits, and takes responsibility. The rest is just noise. There's a type of woman that, after years of study and practice, I've managed to identify and will share with you now. The invisible seductress, a woman who uses neediness disguised as freedom. You've probably met one. She moves lightly, laughs loudly, and always seems to be in a better place than you. She says she doesn't want anything serious, that she's focused on herself, that no man can tie her down. And at first, this sounds like maturity. After all, who doesn't want someone who's settled, free, who knows what they want in life? But there's a catch. This woman isn't free. She's running away. And she's not at peace. She's in emotional survival mode. What you mistake for freedom is just well-disguised neediness. She claims to be detached, but if you don't reply to a message for a few hours, she starts posting indirect messages on her story. She says she doesn't care what you do, but she's monitoring every like, every follower, every minute of your time. And when you confront her, she says, "Relax, I'm not jealous, I just observe." She swears she doesn't want to get attached, but she'll use every emotional trick possible to keep you emotionally attached. This is the invisible seductress. She'll never directly ask you to stay, but she will manipulate you so that you feel guilty about leaving. And herein lies the contradiction. She keeps saying she wants freedom, but she doesn't respect yours. Because deep down, what she wants is control. But because she's not comfortable with her own desire for control, since it would go against the detached persona she's built, she acts on the edges. She uses charm, veiled drama, and subtle provocation. She plays games, disappears for a while, then returns with a melancholic story. It's not love, it's an addiction to being noticed. And you, if you're not careful, become this woman's emotional provider. This is a psychological dynamic much more common than it seems. Carl Jung said that what we do not face within ourselves will manifest as destiny. This woman, whom you consider free and resolved, is trapped in undigested traumas. And the more she runs away from real attachment, the more she surrounds herself with superficial relationships where she never needs to truly give herself. She can have sex, laugh, travel, post, declare herself, but all of this without presence. She participates in your life like someone watching a series. If it's interesting, she stays. If not, she changes the channel. The danger of this is that, on the outside, she seems incredible, praised, sought after, desired. And you, who are trying to connect, begin to feel inadequate. Am I the one who's needy? Am I forcing something? And without realizing it, you begin to mold yourself to her emptiness. You become colder, more distant, more indifferent, because you realize that's the only way she pays attention. But this attention never goes deep. She enjoys your presence as long as it's entertaining. When you start asking for reciprocity, she takes a step back. When you walk away, she reappears. This loop is vicious and addictive. Let's now delve into an overlooked detail: flirting as an emotional addiction. There's a type of woman who doesn't flirt because she wants something from someone. She flirts because she needs the reaction. Flirting is like a dose of dopamine that validates what she herself doesn't believe, that she's still desirable, interesting, alive. And the more insecure she feels, the more she needs this cycle. It's not uncommon for this type of woman to keep a roster of ex-boyfriends, would-be hookups, and friends with benefits orbiting her life. She doesn't close cycles. She accumulates emotional comfort zones. So, whenever she feels empty, she can activate one of these contacts for the reinforcement she needs. It's a game of manipulation, even if she doesn't realize it as such. The big lie is that she says, "I'm enough on my own." But inside she trembles if she doesn't have male attention for more than 48 hours. Her freedom depends on the outside world, and this isn't freedom, it's social servitude with a veneer of modernity. It's the slavery of validation, and what she calls emotional independence is, in practice, an inability to create deep bonds. There's a passage from Simone de Beauvoir where she says, "To want to be free is also to want others to be free." The woman who constantly claims she's free but needs you to behave the way she wants isn't being free. She's trapping you in the chains of her instability. And if you don't realize this, you begin to live in a relationship without a name, without rules, without respect. There's only one thing this type of woman demands: that you be available, but never too available. Because if you show surrender, she feels suffocated. But if you pull away, she panics. Not because she loves you, but because she's lost control of your reflection in her mirror. And that's exactly why she seems so charming at first. She sells herself as the woman who doesn't want to tie you down, who is cool, who enjoys the vibe. And you, who may have just left a worn-out or toxic relationship, feel relieved. Finally, a woman who won't demand anything. But the price of this freedom is high, because you soon realize that the only way to maintain even the slightest connection with her is to become someone who doesn't feel, doesn't demand, doesn't get attached. And this, in the long run, kills any man of value from within. The invisible seductress is the woman who doesn't speak of depth, but demands that you understand her, who doesn't show affection, but demands emotional exclusivity, who claims to be free but can't stand to see you happy with other people. She is a walking paradox, and what she calls lightness is in fact a lack of maturity to sustain authentic bonds. And what she calls freedom is just fear of surrendering, because surrendering would be admitting that she feels it too, wants to be chosen, and fears rejection. But that admission would require courage. And courage, as Kierkegaard would say, is the highest form of sincerity. She's not ready for that sincerity, because she's lived her entire life under the guise of a woman without attachment, when in reality, she's one of the most attached you'll ever meet. Not attached to you, but to herself, to control, to the illusion that she can play with other people's feelings without ever getting hurt. If you're with a woman who claims to be free but acts like a prisoner of her own insecurity, run, because what she calls freedom is just the impossibility of creating something that lasts. And you, if you're not smart, will become just another story she tells in a group of friends while pretending she was the one who decided to leave. Her neediness hides in the most unlikely places, in forced smiles, in strategically sensual photos, in empowering captions. But every woman who truly is self-sufficient doesn't need to shout it all the time. Her silence speaks, her tranquility asserts itself, her presence doesn't compete for space, it fills. And you, as a man, need to learn to hear what lies beyond the words. Because what she says is beautiful, but what she does reveals the truth. This is the woman who says, "I don't want a relationship right now," but gets irritated when you go out with someone else, who says, "Let's live in the moment," but expects you to be emotionally available to her, who says, "I don't owe you an explanation," but wants to know where you are, with whom, and why. This woman is not free. She is a child playing at being an adult, and you, if you're not careful, will become a toy. Which leads us to an inevitable reflection. We are living in an era where the discourse of freedom has become an excuse for emotional escape. And many men, tired of unhealthy relationships, see this new model as something lighter, more modern. But what they find is the same old emptiness, just with a Valencia filter and self-care caption. And then another game begins. The velour theater. When she only pretends she wants something serious, she says she wants something serious. She says she's tired of playing games, that she wants a man of value, that she seeks maturity and real connection. But her every action screams the opposite, because her speech is sophisticated, aligned with what she herself believes she should want. But her body, her habits, her choices reveal a brutal truth. She doesn't want depth. She wants a stage. And if you don't notice, you'll be walking into a theater where the role of the sucker is already cast and named after you. She says she wants a relationship, but every week she's at the same bar, with the same friends, laughing at the same double entendre jokes and dressing as if value were always for sale. When someone proposes depth, she yawns. When someone tries to show she's more than a body, she disappears. She's not looking for a man to love, she's looking for someone to project her frustrations onto. And when she finds a truly willing man, she loses interest. Because this type of woman doesn't know how to handle real love. She's accustomed to chaos. She doesn't seek stability. She seeks excitement. But since excitement requires risk and she's terrified of getting hurt again, she protects herself the only way she knows how, by devaluing anyone who offers what she says she wants. It's the classic paradox. She says, "I want a mature man," but feels bored around an emotionally stable man. She wants the game. She wants the drama. She wants the doubt that makes her feel alive. And when you don't offer it, she creates it, even if she has to destroy something good to do it. This is where many men lose their way. Because she's convincing. She cries, saying she was betrayed. She says she just wants to be cared for, that she has open wounds. And you, with your natural protective instinct, believe you can be different. That you'll heal. That you'll show her that not all men are the same. But this desire to save is exactly what she's looking for. Not to build, but to feed her ego. Because she doesn't want love. She wants the experience of feeling loved, without having to give anything in return. This woman often speaks with a sharp tongue. She talks beautifully about reciprocity, respect, and values, but she never backs it up in practice. She demands presence, but disappears when you need her. She wants attention, but ridicules you if you're too cute. She demands stability, but lives in chaos. She says she hates men who lie, but lies about where she is, who she's with, why she disappeared. And when you confront her, she turns it all around. She calls you insecure, controlling, sexist, because that's her defense, to attack before she's unmasked. The valor play goes like this. She says she wants a high-class man, But look at her track record. All the men she's lived intense stories with are emotionally unavailable, abusive, unstable, or simply don't want anything to do with her. But she continues to romanticize these men because, deep down, she associates love with pain. She doesn't believe she can be loved lightly. So when you try to offer it, she sabotages herself. She creates drama. She tests you. She creates absurd situations just to feel powerful. And that's where the great mistake of men of valor comes in. Trying to prove they're different. The more you try to convince her you're a good man, the more she despises you. Because her respect doesn't come from kindness, it comes from conflict. She only feels alive in dysfunctional relationships because chaos has become her identity, and you, trying to be too good, seem weak. She doesn't want a calm man. She wants a man she can't control. But she also hates feeling powerless. And in this cycle of desire and rejection, you destroy yourself. She says she wants security, but she's always making a point of showing how desired she is by other men. She dresses up more to go out with her friends than to see you. She likes other guys' comments but calls you insecure if you question it. She keeps in touch with exes, but says it's just friendship. Everything is justifiable, everything is light, everything is modern. But the truth is, she needs to feel like she could lose you at any moment to keep you trapped. It's not love. It's a high-performance game of emotional manipulation. That's why the valor play is so dangerous. Because it comes packaged with good intentions, with beautiful speeches, with promises of change. But behind it all, what lies is a woman who is still trapped in previous versions of herself. Versions that haven't been healed, that haven't been seen, that haven't been confronted. And until that happens, every man who tries to love her will, in practice, be a threat. Because love demands vulnerability, and vulnerability, for her, is weakness. This woman doesn't want a partner. She wants a therapist who pays, a lover who tolerates, a boyfriend who doesn't demand. She wants freedom without consequences. She wants presence without commitment. She wants romance without routine. She wants a serious relationship, as long as you accept that the only serious thing there is her ego. And when you try to go further, when you try to go deeper, she'll find a way to sabotage it. She'll pick a fight. She'll disappear for days. She'll use, "I need to find myself again," as an excuse to run away. Most men who struggle in love have one thing in common. They're well-intentioned but naive. They know what they want, but they don't know how to generate desire. They're good, but invisible. And in this world, where female attention is the most sought-after currency, those who don't understand how to pull the right triggers lose out to those who have learned to play dirty with charisma and emotional control. But what if you could turn the tables, without becoming a scoundrel, without having to transform into someone you're not? There's a manual. A direct, precise, lethal guide, created for those who want to awaken desire in the first 60 seconds of an interaction. And we're not talking about ready-made phrases, cliché tricks, or canned self-help. We're talking about applied psychodynamics, strategic body language, and mastered emotional structure. This manual is the next logical step for those who already understand what to avoid. Now, you need to learn how to provoke, how to stand out, how to let your presence speak for you, before you even open your mouth. It's called the Forbidden Manual, How to Trigger Desire in 60 Seconds. It's not a course, it's not a theory book, it's a tactical audiobook, built on principles drawn from Green, Strauss, Jung, Schopenhauer, and the most recent discoveries in the psychology of human desire. And like all forbidden knowledge, it's not for everyone. It's for those who have already overcome their naivete. It's for those who understand that, in the real world, those who don't make an impact become extras, even if they're the right guy. Throughout this content, you've seen the mistakes that most often drive men away from true relationships. You've understood the most common emotional disguises that ruin bonds. But understanding what not to do is only half the equation. Now it's time to master what to do, how to act, what to say, where to touch, how to look, how to make an impression. And if you're still relying on luck, reciprocity, or natural connections, it's because you haven't reached that level of play yet. The link is in the description.